Hello there. Welcome to Third Thursday, Lunch at a Divorce Lawyer. I'm attorney Peter Olson, Chicago Family Law Group. So great to have you live, or appreciate you watching this after the fact. That's the great part about a digital resource. You make it one time and then it's forever. Sometimes that's bad, but in this case, I hope it's a great resource for you. This third Thursday, I'm flying solo. I have some great, exciting guests lined up for my next few months, a realtor, an attorney who's going to talk about reproductive rights and surrogate parenting and things like that, and actually a bankruptcy attorney who we're going to talk about some bankruptcy issues, because that's always relevant to family law, oftentimes, particularly divorce as well. But this month I'm going back to sort of deconstructing a divorce, the different parts of a divorce. Did one of these on sort of preliminary questions and things to ask yourself before you're filing for divorce. Did another one on temporary issues, kind of the things you need to think about during that year and a half while your divorce might be pending. Okay. This month, I'm doing a deep dive on setting child support. Super deep, at least as deep as I can go in about 15 minutes. This is like you could almost do an entire semester on child support, or at least probably an entire 90-minute lecture on it. So this is Cliff Notes 20 minutes, but I think I can really give you a great overview with some real important kind of points you need to be thinking about in terms of setting child support, fighting child support, because there's some very important kind of, things you need to be looking for, because look, it's important, right? A lot of money is at stake. Because right, it's one of these things, it's like my ComEd bill or something, my what is that, electricity? Right, it's every month, right? It's not I'm buying something one time. Child support can be, it can be every month for 10 years, 15 years. And if you do the math on that, in sum, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. So setting it correctly is super important to you, whether you're on the side of, getting your and your child's financial needs met, or if you're on the other side where you're kind of fighting it. Maybe you can't fight the idea that you're going to be paying support, but how much, a couple hundred a month, ends up being thousands over 10 or 15 years. So let's do a deep dive on setting child support right now. Obviously, this is a live Facebook, and so we'll be looking at comments real time, but also obviously after the fact, as obviously this is on our business page here at Chicago Family Law Group. Ready? So first, who is entitled to child support? Who's entitled to child support? Need to have a child. Let's start there. But going beyond that, it's really if you're a parent who has at least 50% of the parenting time. Okay. I think there are a few fringe cases out there that have been decided in Illinois, over history, where somebody who has actually less than 50% of the time has gotten child support, but those are super fringe, and I'm not going to go into them. I think the only examples are where there was like, it's like somebody's multimillionaire parent who is the majority parent, and then the person who might be having like alternate weekends, who would extremely rarely get child support. the imbalance of incomes was like so extreme. It's like $20,000 a year, $2 million a year. And even though the 2 million person was the majority time parent, they had to pay child support to the 20,000 person because of just that huge imbalance. But that's like 0.05% of the time. General rule for you to think about is if you're getting half of the parenting time, you might be entitled to child support. If you get half or more, and in my situation, you earn less money than the other parent, that's kind of your guidepost on, are you entitled to child support? Okay, so are you in that box? Okay, that's why I oftentimes in cases I'm dealing with as I go through a divorce, really try to get the parenting time and the non-financial issues set first, or at least as soon as possible, because really the parenting time setup and the division of parenting time is really going to guide child support. And child support can be a lot easier to set once the parenting time, that allocation of the 100% is taken care of. So first, that is who is entitled to child support. So is that you? Is that you? Do you have 50% of the time with your child or children? Okay. Second, when does parenting time start? Okay, when does it start? Oh, we're talking about divorce specifically. And typically, child support is going to start. If you're that person who's entitled to child support, you have your child. I'm going to just talk about one child, just in all my examples, just so I'm not, using more words than I need to. If you have your child more than 50% of the time, and you're the lower income earner between you and the other parent, I'm going to file, right at the start of a case. If my client is the one who's entitled to child support, one of the first things I'm going to do, if the first thing I'm going to do is to start a case, file a petition for dissolution of marriage, probably the second thing, or even simultaneously, what I'm going to do is I'm going to file a petition to set temporary child support. So as soon as there's a case active, that's typically when child support is going to start. So my goal at the start of a divorce case, if I'm on that correct side of the case, is I'm gonna file and have the goal of really getting temporary child support going probably 60 to 90 days from the start of the case. Just that's kind of the realistic kind of time frame in terms of how fast I can get the court system to move. But 60 to 90 days is a realistic to get temporary support going. And, beyond that, it's obviously also going to be included in your final divorce judgment, for what I would call permanent child support, what's going to live on once the case is finalized. So who is entitled to child support? We answered that question. When does it start? I just answered that. When does it stop? If you're on that side of things, just something to think about. Right, temporary child support would end once the divorce is finalized. And then when does child support end more globally? Meaning, if it's set in your divorce, when can you stop it? I think I actually have an entire YouTube video on the topic in our YouTube channel. If you go to our Chicago Family Law Group YouTube channel, but just really quick, when does child support stop? It's going to be one of three times. The most common time would be when your son or daughter graduates high school. And then the other two scenarios, depending on your, usually it's depending on your child's birthday. Are they a young member of like their class, or are they an old member? And sometimes you get a situation where child support stops when your kid turns 18. Sometimes child support when your kid turns 19. The most common, maybe the first or second most common question we get that people have the wrong idea on is they think child support stops when their kid turns 18. And that's very uncommon. What is most common, 80–90% of the time, is child support stops when your child is graduated from high school. Okay, so we're talking about setting child support today on our third Thursday lunch and a divorce lawyer. What I've talked about is who's entitled to child support. You know, if you're a parent with at least half time with your kid per court order. When does it start? Like I said, usually 60 or 90 days after the divorce case starts. When does it stop? We talked about those 3 times: high school graduation, turns 18, turns 19. Okay. So now you should kind of have a picture of, you know, basically, are you generically entitled to child support? Okay. Now let's do it. Here's where the real nitty gritty is in terms of the deep dive, in terms of like how much, you know, how much are you going to receive? How much are you going to have to pay? And really, how is that calculated? Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of small, nuanced levers that a good family law attorney is going to move to change that number. And like I said, that's a monthly number that's going to be every month for 10 years. So it's super important. You know, moving at $50 either way is thousands of dollars. So, you know, make sure you have somebody or, you know, who knows what they're talking about, because the state of Illinois is probably not going to move too many levers for you. You're probably going to get the minimum. You know, if you got the state with their, you know, 50 cases handling your case, you know, you're probably going to get 5 minutes instead of a deep dive that's going to, you know, basically get you thousands of dollars more. So let's look at how child support is calculated, and it really help. I want you to understand the different levers that really move the number when we're talking about child support. I'm gonna jump on a software program here and actually do a little real-time sort of calculating, just so you know the levers that matter. Ready? Okay. Let me see if I can make, no, that's okay. So here, let's make some assumptions when we're talking about child support. The only assumption I'm going to make here is we're going to talk about one child. Okay, now is when I'm going to move a lot of levers around. Okay, here's the first critical lever. Okay, it's the number of overnights with your child. You see it here, number of overnights. Because Illinois has 2 different formulas, and the magic number is, does the non-majority parent have 146 overnights or more or less? Let's just look at it. Look at how these numbers change. Okay, so first, I'm going to say the custodial or the majority time parent has 300 overnights, right? You know, typical year, 365 days. Right, if I'm giving the custodial, I don't even know what a custodial parent is, but if I'm giving the majority parent 300 days, that means the non-majority only has 65, right? So let's just mess around right here and look how these numbers change depending on which side of the 146 you're on, because that's critical. So I'm going to assume each parent makes $8,000 a month. You know, it's pretty kind of common income, 100,000-ish a year, 105. And then I'm just going to fill in some of this stuff just so it'll spit out a number at me. Okay, so let's look at the number here. Oh, sorry, what did I do there? I want you to see the difference in how overnights really move the needle, okay? Okay, so here is our critical number here. We're looking at overnights. That's the first lever. I want you to be super clear, okay? I'm gonna calculate, and what do we get here? Child support, $787 a month. Do you see that? $787 a month. Now, let's make a change, okay? If I change this number to the majority type parent is only going to have 200 overnights, okay? Let's think about it now. So now the non-majority parent has 165. And so obviously 165 is greater than 146. And you know, it's just a random number, but right, that's what's in the law in Illinois. It's getting more than 146. Let's look at how that changes the child support. Right, we were at 787. I'm going to hit calculate. Let's see where we go. I went down to 104. Do you see? That's the biggest lever you've got. You know, right? I'm talking around both sides, right? We have clients who are going to be receiving child support. I have clients who I'm going to be fighting child support against, right? So that's the biggest thing that's the biggest, strongest lever you've got is number of overnights, okay? 100% biggest lever, you know, so, you know, I want somebody to get a lot of time with their kids. It's also going to help them on the child support front too. So, all right. So now let's look at another lever here, just while we're on here. And I don't want to go on forever. Now I'm just going to go back to a baseline. Let's just say this is maybe a typical situation where some man, let's just say, has kind of alternate week overnights. I think technically that gets you to about, well, what does that get you to? It gets you to about 26 times 2. It gets you to about, let's just say the average, I'm just going to leave 300 just for kicks. You know, somebody has alternate weekend parenting time. Now, let's look at some other important levers here, okay? So we're talking about this person who's paying $787 a month in child support. Now, just in a case like this earlier this week, this guy had a younger child we were setting child support on, but he had an older child too that he was the primary parent of. So we have this thing called multifamily adjustments. That means there is a child other than the child who we're setting support for. So let's look at how this scenario changes. This guy had one other child, and now I'm going to hit calculate. Ready? Boom. Slow internet, operation was successful. So, you know, that saved him. You know, that went from 787 to 701. And right, there are different ways to do it here. You know, is there a child support order with that other kid or not? That's irrelevant. But, you know, it's $87, whatever, $86 difference, right? We were at 180, we were at 787, now we're at 701. You know, I don't know, $86. I'm not losing a lot of sleep over, but right, $86 over the course of a year is basically $1,000, right? And we're talking about a 10 or 15-year obligation. Now you're talking about real money, okay? So overnights is a big lever. Whether or not there are children other than the child or children that we're studying support for, a big lever. All right, so here, I'm moving this back to 0. I'm just going to get this back to our baseline of, are you going to calculate? Come on, internet. Back to our baseline of 787. What if there's a maintenance obligation in your divorce case? Okay, that's something, right? You have to pay spousal support to your husband or wife. Okay, because that's another one, right? If there is maintenance being paid, maintenance paid or payable, let's just say it's $750 a month, right? I need to pay my my ex-wife $750 a month for child support. Okay, let's see how that lever moves things. Whoa, user error. I'm just going to put it at the start of this month, and I'm going to calculate. Boom. All right, so it moves the needle. You see it went down to 706. I mean, what functionally maintenance does is it lowers the income that is used to calculate child support. So what are your big levers? Again, I'm just going through some levers when we're talking about changing child support in terms of how it's calculated. Number of overnights. Are there other children? Are you paying maintenance or spousal support? Are you the parent who's paying health insurance for the child? You know, I'm getting rid of my maintenance. And here, we're just going to get back to the baseline 787 because I really want you to just understand what these look like. I had a recent case where a gentleman was going to have a child support obligation, a small one, but he was going to have one. However, he was in charge of, or he was financially responsible. He had a good job at I think at Elmhurst College. And so he had a pretty good benefits package. So he was providing the health insurance. My recollection is he was paying the non-custodial, didn't even matter, but he was paying the child support, or straight that, the health insurance, and I think it was right around $400 a month. And so this child, who he might have had a child support obligation for, he was paying the health insurance. So he was already paying $400 a month in basically a financial obligation for the child. So it actually served to wipe out his child support obligation entirely in the case I was talking about, just because the parents' incomes were very minimally different. And in this particular case, the parenting time was exactly equal. But let's just use our example, right? This guy's paying $787 a month in child support now. But what happens when now we add the health insurance? Boom, right? That made a big difference, you know, because again, he's already sort of contributing $400 a month. So it serves, what it really does is it puts the other parent on the hook for 200 of the health insurance, and he's on the hook for 200. So it functionally basically reduced his child support by $200 a month. And again, what is that? Probably $40,000 over the course of the child's life if it's a young kid. So that's a big lever, the child support lever. If somebody is paying for private health insurance, that's expensive. Believe me, as a small business person, I think that's actually after paying our staff, I think health insurance is our largest expense. Believe me, I know how much that costs. Let me talk about one final lever because I don't really like to go too much beyond 20 minutes or so on these. Here's the lever. Here, let's wipe this out just to get clear. I'm just going to go back to none, get it back to 787. But here's, we've talked about a bunch of little levers here. Health insurance can make a big difference. Who's paying health insurance? If somebody's paying spousal support, that makes a big difference. Are there other children? The multifamily adjustment, that makes a big difference. What are your two biggest levers? Number one is number of overnights, okay? We saw that change. I think it was from $787 a month to $104 a month. Huge, huge, huge difference. Let me talk about one other big one, and that is this. It's basically gross to net monthly income. These two line items right here. If you're a small business person, okay, because I don't know, I have a few clients right now, and you know, this is me. I'm not paying child support to anybody right now. I'm actually married to my spouse, so and no other you know, non-marital children up there. But you know, it's a small business person, and the examples I'm gonna just that come to the top of my mind are truck drivers, because I have a couple cases right now where we have a client and or the other side on a case who's a truck driver, where you know, this guy is having, you know, 30, 40, $50,000 going into his account every month. But ordinary and reasonable business expenses, you know, payroll, health insurance, in the truck driver example, paying your drivers, gas, those are things that you get to deduct before we get to the net income, because child support is foundationally set not on gross income, but on net income. So that's why when you have a person who owns a small business, getting credit for, or again, depends what side of the case I'm on in terms of my approach, but that gross income for the small business person versus the net income, and what are appropriate and necessary business expenses is a huge thing. Because right, you know, gross income, you know, a lot of these truck drivers, it looks like their gross income, and in fact their gross is pretty high, you know, 30,000, 40,000 a month. But there are a lot of expenses going out of that, where sometimes I've seen, you know, maybe their net income is more like $5,000 a month. So, you know, so I'm just messing around with some numbers there, but you know, so I'm just going to, you know, start to land the plane, wrap up here on setting child support, a critical issue kind of going through a divorce, and obviously after that divorce judgment is entered. So who's entitled to child support? When does it start? When does it stop? How does it get calculated? Note some of those important ways to you know, kind of move the needle a lot in terms of how it's calculated. And hey, just final one in terms of how is child support calculated. Once in a great while, you have a person who their income is hard to establish, or it's hard to ascertain. And you know, I have a current case where the opposing party in case is living a super kind of, you know, from the outside, high income lifestyle. You know, just the cars and the home and this kind of thing that would make you think he's earning a lot of money. But you know, he hides his income pretty well. It may not be totally legal income. Let's put it that way. Wink, wink. In those situations, you can do what's called a needs-based child support order, where my client was able to show these are her financial needs for her son, and we set child support, you know, based on what the child needs, you know, food, clothing, housing, instead of more this traditional income-based picture. So keep that in mind when you have somebody who's a little shady with their money. So I'm going to leave it there. Went a little longer than I'd like to go, but you know, no joke. Setting child support is super important. It's super complex, and you know, you want to do it right because a lot of money is at stake. So I'm attorney Peter Olson, Chicago Family Law Group. Drop us some questions, comments, or you need some one-on-one advice consultation. We're at familylawchicago.com for your consultation. I look forward to serving you. See you next month.